My name is Stella Brooks, and I was stupid. Not the kind of stupid you fix with a calculator or a textbook. The kind of stupid that breaks your heart into a million pieces and makes you question everything you ever believed in. 4 or 5 years. I loved someone with all of my soul. I gave him my trust, my time, my future. And he lied to me every single day. Every single morning when he kissed my forehead before work, it was a lie. Every "I love you" whispered in the dark was a lie. Every promise about our future together was nothing but beautiful, poisonous words designed to keep me blind. I didn't know any of this yet. I was still living in my fairy tale, completely unaware that my entire world was about to collapse. Life was perfect, or at least I thought it was. I had my job at the marketing firm, my apartment that I decorated carefully, and most importantly, I had Michael. Or so I believed. That morning started like every other morning. I woke up to my alarm at 6 o'clock and went through my routine automatically. Shower, coffee, makeup. The usual things that fill your day without you even thinking about them. I looked in the mirror and smiled at myself. I was happy. I was in love. I had no idea that my entire life was about to change forever. Michael was still sleeping when I left for work. He always slept in on Thursdays. He said his job at the investment firm exhausted him, so he deserved the extra rest. I didn't mind. It gave me time to think about our weekend plans. We were supposed to go to the beach house that his family owned upstate. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. Everything seemed normal and perfect as I kissed his shoulder gently and grabbed my bag. The weather was nice, and I felt positive about the day ahead. Work was busy but manageable. I processed client files and attended meetings about new campaigns. My coworker, Dennis, asked me about my weekend plans during lunch. I told him excitedly about the beach house trip. He smiled and said it sounded wonderful. I smiled back, completely unaware of what I would discover that night. When I got home around 6 o'clock, Michael still wasn't there. His car wasn't in the driveway. I texted him asking where he was, and he replied that he had a last-minute client meeting that ran late. He said he would be home by 8. I believed him without question. I had never had a reason not to believe him before. I made myself some dinner and settled on the couch with a book, waiting for him to come home. Around 7:30, I got bored and decided to tidy up the apartment. I started in the bedroom, straightening things that didn't really need straightening. That's when I noticed Michael's laptop on his nightstand. The screen was dark, but I knew his password. We had shared passwords for everything. Bills, emails, social media accounts. We were supposed to be open and honest with each other. I can't explain why I opened it. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was something deeper that I didn't understand yet. I told myself I was just checking the weather for the weekend. I told myself I was just going to look at something harmless. But we both know that's not true. I opened his email first, and what I saw made my stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. There were hundreds of emails. Hundreds. All from someone named Victoria. The messages were recent, dating back months. My hands started shaking as I began to read them. They weren't professional emails. They were intimate, personal, and absolutely devastating. Michael had been seeing someone else. Not just seeing. He had been building an entire relationship with this person while he was with me. I sat on the edge of our bed, feeling like the room was spinning around me. The emails described dates, secret meetings, and private jokes that I was never part of. There were emails about future plans together. Plans that didn't include me. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I needed to see more. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. I opened his text messages next. The conversation threads with Victoria were endless. They went back almost 2 years. 2 years. I had only known Michael for 5 years, and he had been seeing this woman for almost 40% of our relationship. The messages were full of affection and inside jokes. They called each other pet names. They made plans for weekends when I thought he was working. One message made me freeze completely. Victoria had written, "When are you going to finally leave her? I'm tired of sharing with you." Michael's response was, "Soon, baby. I promise. Just need to figure out the money situation first." Money situation. He was using me for money. My entire relationship was built on lies and money. I couldn't breathe properly. My vision started to blur, and I realized I was crying. Hot tears streamed down my face as I continued reading message after message. The betrayal was so complete and total that I couldn't even process it all at once. I read one message where Michael had told Victoria that he didn't actually love me. He said I was convenient and useful. He said I was boring and predictable. Those words cut deeper than any knife could have. Everything I thought I was to him was wrong. Everything I believed about our relationship was a carefully constructed lie. I heard his car pull into the driveway at 8:15. I froze, still holding his laptop like it was the only piece of evidence that could prove this nightmare was real. I had to make a choice. I could confront him right now, screaming and crying and destroying everything. Or I could stay calm and think strategically. I had just discovered something massive. I needed to understand the full extent of what was happening before I did anything. So I took a breath, closed the laptop, and wiped my eyes. Michael came through the door like he always did, loosening his tie and smiling at me like nothing was wrong. He kissed my cheek and asked how my day was. The normalcy of it all made me want to scream. I told him my day was fine, just tired. He nodded and said he was exhausted too from the client meeting. It was such an easy lie, told with such confidence. I wondered how many lies he had told me. How many times had he looked me in the eye and lied? I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. I needed to calm down and think. My mind was racing in 100 different directions. I thought about our life together, the apartment we shared, the vacations we had taken, the time I spent crying over a miscarriage 2 years ago, and he was there holding my hand while secretly texting another woman. That's what hurt the most. He had been there during my worst moments, pretending to be my support while betraying me. I spent an hour sitting on the bathroom floor, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't just leave him. I needed evidence. Real, solid evidence that I could use if I needed to. I needed proof that would hold up if this ever went to court over finances or assets. I also needed to understand exactly what he had been doing and with whom. So I made a plan. I would play along like everything was normal. I would pretend I didn't know anything. I would gather information, document everything, and then I would strike. It took all my strength to go back out to the living room and act like my world hadn't just fallen apart. Michael was watching television. He patted the couch next to him, and I sat down. He put his arm around me like he always did. Every touch felt like poison. Every word felt like a lie. But I smiled and pretended everything was fine. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to him in the darkness, listening to him breathe, watching his face in the moonlight coming through the window. This was the man I had trusted completely. This was the man I was supposed to marry. This was the man who was throwing away everything we had for money and another woman. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and a dangerous determination. I had spent the entire night thinking about what I needed to do, and I had a plan. Day one of my revenge was going to be gathering information. I needed to know everything about Victoria. I needed to know where she lived, where she worked, and who her friends and family were. I needed to understand the complete picture before I made any moves. After Michael left for work, I got back to his laptop. This time, I took screenshots of everything. The emails, the text messages, the photos he had saved. I created a hidden folder in my cloud storage and uploaded all of it. I also searched through his browsing history and found hotel confirmations for bookings under fake names. He had been renting rooms to meet Victoria dozens of times over the past 2 years. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. I then searched for Victoria on social media and found her easily. Victoria Chun. She worked as a lawyer at a prestigious firm downtown. She was beautiful, I had to admit. She had the kind of polished, sophisticated look that comes from money and privilege. Looking at her pictures made me angry. She was smiling in all of them, completely unaware that I knew about her. Or maybe she did know about me and just didn't care. I spent the entire day watching Victoria's social media accounts. I traced her routines, her habits, her friends. I found her work address, her gym location, her favorite coffee shop. I was building a complete profile of this woman who had helped destroy my life. I also researched Victoria's family and found that her father was a prominent businessman in the city. They seemed to be a wealthy, well-connected family. This made sense now. Michael wasn't just attracted to Victoria because of her looks or personality. He was attracted to her because of what she represented. Access to money and power. Everything I thought he loved me for meant nothing. I was just a stepping stone. The realization was painful, but it also made me angrier. That anger became fuel. I needed to use it wisely. That evening, I acted completely normal around Michael. We had dinner together. I asked him about his day. I laughed at his jokes. I was an excellent actress. He had no idea that I knew the truth. He went to bed around 11, and I waited until he was asleep before I did something risky. I created a new email account using a fake name. The new email account was going to be my tool for investigation and eventually for justice. I used it to start researching court records and legal documents. I searched for any dirt I could find on Victoria's family. I looked into her work history and her social media presence going back years. I was building a case, even though I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do with it yet. I just knew that I wanted to understand everything about this situation. I wanted to know exactly how deep this betrayal went and who else might be involved. I spent hours doing this research, my eyes tired but my mind sharp. Around 2 a.m, I finally stopped and went to bed. Michael was sleeping peacefully beside me, his arm draped across my waist like we were still in love. I moved away from him slowly, careful not to wake him up. I couldn't stand being close to him. His touch made my skin crawl now. The man I loved was gone, replaced by the stranger who had been lying to me the entire time. I lay on the very edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn started breaking through the window. Day 2 of my revenge plan started with a difficult decision. I needed to talk to someone I trusted, but I also needed to be careful. I couldn't let this information get back to Michael or Victoria. I decided to call my best friend, Cameron. Cameron had known me for 10 years. She worked in human resources and had a good understanding of legal issues. We met for coffee that afternoon at a cafe far from my office and far from Michael's usual routes. I told her everything. The affair, the emails, the hotel bookings, the text messages. Cameron listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she reached across the table and grabbed my hand. She told me I was going to be okay, but first I needed to make some important decisions. She advised me to consult with a lawyer before doing anything dramatic. She said I needed to protect my financial interests and understand my rights. This was good advice. I knew I needed professional help navigating this situation, but I also knew I wasn't ready to end things with Michael yet. I had my own plans. I spent the next few days establishing routines and gathering more evidence. I followed Michael one afternoon and watched him meet Victoria at a hotel downtown. They arrived separately but went into the same room. I waited outside and took photos with my phone of them entering the building together. The evidence was piling up. I was also documenting when Michael lied to me. Each lie got added to a list that I was keeping hidden in my phone. He said he was at client meetings when he was actually with Victoria. He said he was working late when he was actually having dinner with her. The lies were constant and effortless. I was beginning to understand that Michael was a skilled manipulator. He had spent years perfecting his deception. He knew exactly what to say to keep me calm and trusting. This realization was both horrifying and somehow helpful. If he could lie so easily, then I could too. I could use his own tactics against him. On day 5, I contacted a divorce lawyer. The lawyer's office was cold and professional. Her name was Mrs. Patricia Woods, and she was direct and no nonsense. I laid out all my evidence. The screenshots, the photos, the documentation of his lies. She reviewed everything carefully and then looked at me over her reading glasses. She told me that Michael didn't know what he had just given me. The infidelity, combined with the financial misconduct I had discovered, put me in a very strong position. She said that if I played this correctly, I could protect my assets and potentially come out ahead financially. But she also warned me that divorce was messy and painful. She recommended that I take some time to think about what I really wanted. Did I want revenge, or did I want healing? I told her I didn't know yet. She said that was honest at least. She gave me a retainer agreement and told me to contact her when I was ready to move forward. By day 8, I had a clear picture of what Michael and Victoria were doing. They met 3 times a week at hotels around the city. They had coded language they used in their messages. They had plans to run away together, but they were waiting for something. I needed to figure out what they were waiting for. After digging through Michael's financial records, I found the answer. He was planning to drain our joint savings account and disappear. He had been slowly moving money into a separate account that Victoria didn't even know about. He was going to take her money, steal my money, and vanish. Michael wasn't just a cheater. He was a con artist. He was manipulating both of us for money. The anger I felt was so intense that I had to go for a long run just to burn off the energy. I ran until my legs felt like jelly and my lungs burned with effort. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. I was going to do this my way. On day 10, I started phase 2 of my plan. I reached out to Victoria using my fake email account. I created a persona, a concerned friend of hers who had discovered something troubling. I told her that I had evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct involving her partner, Michael. I attached a few key documents to prove I was serious. I told her I would be happy to share more information if she was interested. The response came within an hour. Victoria was interested. Very interesting. I had set the hook, and she had taken the bait. We started corresponding through the fake email account. I fed her information slowly, carefully, making sure she believed every word. I told her that Michael had been hiding money from her. I told her that he was planning to disappear with both our life savings. I was painting a picture of a man who was using both of us. Victoria seemed shocked by this revelation, but she was also angry. She wanted proof. I provided the proof. I sent her bank statements showing Michael's separate accounts. I sent her messages. He had written about how much money he was stealing. I was selective in what I shared, making sure not to reveal that the information was coming from me. Victoria was becoming increasingly convinced that Michael was playing her. I could see her falling into the trap I had so carefully constructed. She started asking questions about his other relationship. I told her that he had a girlfriend named Stella who he was planning to abandon once he had all the money he could get from her. I told her that he had made similar promises to me about leaving his ex-wife. Wait, that wasn't true. I had never mentioned an ex-wife before. I had invented one on the spot to make the lie more believable. Victoria seemed to believe it completely. She was starting to see the full picture of Michael's manipulation and deception. By day 13, I had turned Victoria against Michael. She was furious. She wanted revenge, just like I did. But she didn't know that I was the one orchestrating everything. She thought she was getting inside information from an anonymous source who wanted to help her. The irony was that we were both seeking justice against the same person, even though she didn't know I was involved. I decided it was time to take the next step. I reached out to Victoria's father using the same fake email account. I told him that his daughter was in a relationship with a man who was financially exploiting her. I sent him bank statements and hotel receipts. I told him that this man was trying to manipulate her into giving him access to her family's money. Victoria's father was a successful businessman. He would not tolerate anyone taking advantage of his daughter. The response from Victoria's father came 3 days later. He was taking the matter very seriously. He had hired private investigators to look into Michael's background. They had discovered that Michael had done this before. Years ago, he had been involved with another woman in another city. He had drained her bank account and disappeared. There were multiple victims of Michael's scheme. He was a serial con artist. This discovery filled me with a strange mixture of emotions. I felt vindicated in my anger, but I also felt sick. Michael wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal. He was a predator who targeted women for their money. How many women had he done this to? How many lives had he destroyed? The investigation into Michael was expanding rapidly. Victoria's father had connections, and he was using them. The police were now involved. I knew that Michael didn't suspect anything yet. He still came home every evening, kissed me hello, and told me lies about his day. But I could feel the pressure mounting around him. His phone was ringing more often. He seemed nervous and distracted. On day 18, he got a call from a police detective. I watched his face go pale as he listened to whatever the detective was saying. He said very little, mostly just listening. When he hung up, he looked at me and said that there had been some kind of misunderstanding about some business dealings. He said he needed to talk to a lawyer. He said it was nothing serious, just a precaution. I knew better. The investigation was closing in. Victoria's father had brought the authorities into the situation. Michael's house of lies was beginning to crumble. Michael hired a lawyer the next day. He became increasingly anxious and paranoid. He started checking his phone constantly. He made phone calls in the other room when he thought I was sleeping. He was trying to reach Victoria, but she wasn't answering anymore. She had cut off all contact with him. I knew this because I was still monitoring the fake email account. Victoria had sent me a message thanking me for opening her eyes to Michael's true nature. She said she was going to testify against him if it came to that. She said she was grateful that someone had cared enough to warn her. The irony was delicious. I had set the whole thing up, and she had no idea. By day 22, Michael's entire life was falling apart. The police investigation had expanded. They were looking into his finances, his background, and his previous relationships. I received a visit from Detective Raymond on day 24. He came to the apartment with questions about Michael's behavior and our relationship. I told him that I had suspected infidelity, but hadn't known about the financial crimes. I gave him access to everything I had discovered. I gave him the screenshots, the photos, and the bank statements. I provided him with dates and timelines. The detective was impressed by how thorough I had been. He asked me if I had known about the financial crimes all along. I said no, I had only discovered them after discovering the affair. This was technically true. I had discovered both things at the same time. I just hadn't mentioned my role in orchestrating the investigation. The detective seemed satisfied with my answers. He told me that they had enough evidence to arrest Michael and press charges. The arrest would happen within the week. Michael sensed that something was very wrong. He became increasingly desperate and erratic. He asked me if I had talked to the police. I said of course I had. I told him that they had come asking questions about him. I pretended to be confused and heard about the whole situation. I acted like I was just as much a victim as everyone else. Michael tried to convince me that it was all a misunderstanding. He said that the other woman had misrepresented the situation. He said that the money issues were being blown out of proportion. He was lying, and I let him. I let him think for a few more days that he might still be able to get out of this. I let him suffer in the uncertainty. On day 26, the police arrested Michael at his office. He was charged with fraud, financial exploitation, and bigamy in another state. The charges were serious and would result in prison time if he was convicted. I wasn't there when they arrested him, but I heard about it from Cameron, who saw it on the local news. The news coverage of Michael's arrest was extensive. Local businessmen arrested for fraud and exploitation, the headlines read. They interviewed Victoria, who explained how she had been manipulated and deceived. They interviewed his previous victim from another state. They painted a picture of a serial con artist who had destroyed multiple lives. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know that a woman sitting in her apartment across town had orchestrated the entire downfall. They didn't know that I had been the one who had set everything in motion. Michael's face was all over the news, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction watching him finally face consequences for his actions. He had spent 5 years lying to me, and I had spent 30 days destroying him. It felt like justice, even if it wasn't the kind of justice that came from the courts. It was the kind of justice that came from inside, from a place of strength and intelligence. Over the next few days, Michael's entire life fell apart. His law firm fired him. His reputation was destroyed. Victoria's father pursued civil charges against him in addition to the criminal charges. He lost access to his assets as they were frozen pending investigation. He was facing years in prison. I visited him once in the holding cell before his trial. He didn't recognize me at first. When I told him it was me, his face went through about 10 different emotions all at once. He asked me how I could do this to him. He asked me if I had turned him in to the police. I smiled and told him the truth. I told him that I had discovered his affair and his crimes. I told him that I had engineered every moment of his downfall. I told him that I had destroyed him the same way he had destroyed me. He tried to deny it at first, but then he realized it was pointless. I had won. Standing in that holding cell, looking at Michael's devastated face, I realized something important. Revenge had felt good for a moment, but it didn't actually fix anything. It didn't bring back the 5 years I had wasted on him. It didn't erase the pain of discovering his betrayal. It didn't heal the broken parts of my heart. What it did do was show me that I was strong enough to survive this. I was clever enough to see through his lies. I was brave enough to do something about it. Michael was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Victoria eventually sued him civilly and won a substantial settlement. I recovered my share of the money and started my life over. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone else as much as they hurt you. Real revenge is about becoming the best version of yourself despite what they did. It's about refusing to be destroyed by someone else's cruelty. It's about turning pain into power and using that power to build something better. That's the real victory. Not Michael's prison sentence, but my survival and my strength.